Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's episode. I'm so happy to have Dr. Lee on the call, or as he is usually referred to as Lee the Scientist. So, what's up, Lee?
How's it going? I'm super happy to
Good.
join you.
I'm so happy for you to be here. So, Lee had just finished his PhD last year from Thomas Jefferson University in genetics and genetics, genomics, and cancer biology.
Yeah,
Right, Lee?
there's a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just remember connecting with Lee on Instagram and like him just being so vocal and posting his pictures in the lab and just being like that cool down to earth scientist. And Lee, from then I was like stalking Lee, like, hey Lee, we need to talk. We need to talk. And so I finally got Lee here on the call. And Lee's also worked with me on some other career consulting projects, and he's just awesome. So, Lee, from my personal experience with you, I know that you actually secured your job like before you defended your
Yeah,
research.
yeah. So I can speak to that a bit. I was definitely on the job hunt like the last year of my PhD. So I
Mhm.
was interviewing even before I had I think I already had my defense. No, I had to have my defense date. I was interviewing while I was like scheduling my last thesis meeting to ask to write. I was already doing interviews.
Wow.
Um, And really, that was just because I had been nurturing, all of these contacts and networks. And I was like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
like 6 to 8 months out. Let me start doing some interviews.
Right, right. That's awesome. And I know you've always been business savvy. I know that just going back to your time in Florida, I know that you have your bachelor's degree from Florida Atlantic University. So shout out to the South. I'm a Southern girl too.
Go else.
But yeah. And yeah, but I know that you were like a promoter in Florida, and from a promoter in Florida to now working at Axiom Health Care Strategies. Like
Right.
you've always had that business savviness to you. Even at Thomas Jefferson, I know you were one of the co-founders for BizBio.
So this bio had started before I got there. But
Mm-hmm.
once I got to Thomas Jefferson University, I joined as a member. It was like a student organization. And then like my following year, like my sophomore year in grad school, I was like, I was part of the board
Wow.
because I like had a vision
Yep.
for how I think this
Yeah.
stuff should go and how
Mm-hmm.
what resources students needed. And so then it
Yes.
was if they weren't being provided, then it was like I need to go get them. And it's also important to then share those resources once you got them.
Right, right. And I know that's something that you took very serious while in grad school. Just working with students, you worked on projects, you co-created and implemented case study workshops, you
Yeah.
recruited for Abercrams. Like how like kind of give us some background, like where did these passions come from? How did you maintain defending your research, publishing papers, being a social media, influencer, as
Yeah.
you would say? How did you manage all of this while doing your PhD?
So I think there's a few. I think FYI. So all students that are thinking about doing a PhD, they need like have this consideration.
Yes.
They say there's like four things you can do in grad school. There's like you can like eat, sleep, um, do research, and then like build your career, like
Hmm.
network and stuff like that. And then
Yeah.
there's like social life, right? And then they
Yes.
say like you can't do all five of them.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and they're probably right. So I didn't sleep a lot during grad
Yes.
school. I have a horrible sleep schedule.
Like what?
I,
3 hours a night? 4?
yeah, like 20 hours. Yeah, I was like getting up at 5, going to the lab, doing stuff, and then like making it to like happy hours in the city to like
The
mingle with
network.
like biotech people,
Right.
and then like going back to the lab at like night in like a shirt and tie and
Wow.
sports coat in the
Wow.
lab. Yeah, it was
You were so committed to
yeah,
all
but I think
pillars.
yeah, I think yeah, except for the sleep part. I was
Right, except that one.
um and I was still, having a social life because you gotta. the PhD is super stressful, so you got to carve out time for yourself,
Absolutely.
so that you can keep it under wraps. It's
Mhm.
it's it's super stressful to go through that. It's long. It's like 5 years,
Mhm.
6 years even sometimes. So you got to pick where you want to be at. And if I think if you're interested in doing industry related things during your PhD and you're not at an Ivy League institution, FYI, most of us aren't at Ivy League institutions, then you need to network to even the playing field, so to speak.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that because that's also my story. I'm a two-time HBCU graduate, and networked so much to get to have secure my first job in industry.
But
Like I woke up like that consisted of my life. The last year of my PhD
mhm,
program was networking and trying to meet people and identifying companies that I wanted to work and finding people within those companies who knew someone that I may know. Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of work.
yeah. I mean, and on top of that was you mentioned some of the stuff I was doing for the university. I was just
Yes.
I'm a social butterfly, right? You talked about me being a promoter, when I was in South
Yep.
Florida. And it's like students are like, gee, these kids are geniuses. Like, I'm smart and all that, but you got PhD programs, you got people there that are like on a spectrum and like super smart, but they're horrible communicators and they don't ask for help and
Yeah.
they don't really know what they want because they're not exposing themselves. So I think it was just like really a passion for me to like show students that there's other stuff out there. This is what your
Right.
worth is.
Right.
And if you want to stay in the lab for the rest of your life, cool. But
Right.
I don't want that to be the option because you didn't think that there was anything else you couldn't do. And
Right.
so
Right.
doing all those,
Absolutely.
case study stuff and, inviting speakers and recruiting even for the university, I got the opportunity to go to some conferences and essentially recruit minority students
Mhm.
specifically to Jefferson.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so that was like a super plus, and it was like, hey, I'm here. there's not a lot of us, but at least I'm here.
Yep.
So you might have a good time.
Right.
So yeah, it was just, to be honest, it was an opportunity to just expose myself to many
Mhm.
things as possible. I really
Mhm.
and even in that I was like working with administrators for universities and from the university, and like some of them had PhDs, some of them were like postdocs and like an administrative setting. And I realized I didn't
Yep.
want to do that either, but at least I knew I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that because I had like explored and talked to people in that setting.
Right.
So I
Right.
had like an understanding, like, yeah, I can't see myself doing that for the next 10 years or something like that.
Right. Right, for sure. And I know that you did a lot of informational interviews. Why don't you explain what is an informational interview and what was your approach to doing it to make your career decision?
All right, awesome. So this is a fantastic question. So
Mhm.
an informational interview is essentially when you reach out to somebody that is in a professional setting, um, or that has a career that you want to learn more about. And so you contact that person to ask them about their career, some of the nuances about the job, and to try to get some feedback on whether you might be a good fit. That's the purpose of it. How I went about this is, though, I absorbed all available information I could that was accessible before I got on
Mhm.
an informational interview.
Mhm.
And what I did when I actually found somebody to talk to, either via LinkedIn or networking or whatever, LinkedIn is a great resource. We could talk about that in depth. Most of
Yes.
my interactions have been through LinkedIn. When you reach out to people and you talk to them, that interview serves two purposes for you: to pressure test some of the assumptions that you have from all of your research that you've done about their role, and for you to market yourself to that person.
Yep.
Everybody you talk to, that's an opportunity for you to brand, for you to get in their brain and say, hey, remember that kid I talked to like 6 months ago? This new position came up. Maybe I should reach back out to him on LinkedIn because he was really bright or he was really enthusiastic or whatever the case
Right.
may be. And so that's the
Right.
type of impressions you want to leave on people. And if you do enough of those, I probably did like 60 informational interviews. Only the first 20 were like
You
really
said six
informative.
zero
Yeah, like probably like 60, like over the course of 4 years.
Wow.
Cause I was doing informational interviews like in my second year.
From day one. But
Yeah.
right, but how did you know to do that? Like even me in my second year, my PhD program, I didn't even know about industry jobs like the one I'm in. I knew Johnson and Johnson. I'm a pharmacologist. I should work at Johnson and Johnson. Or,
Yeah.
I didn't how did you even know to make these approaches?
Um, so that was from a little bit from the in-person stuff.
Yeah.
I was meeting, I did my PhD in Philly. It's like the fifth largest city in the US. And also
Mhm.
there's a ton of pharma, and not necessarily in the city, but in the broader Philadelphia area.
Mhm.
J&J is like right across the street. BMS is in New Jersey and Princeton, which is like an hour outside of Philly. GSK, all this stuff. There's a bunch of companies.
Mhm.
So I had met a few people that worked in these spaces.
Mhm.
For companies, I met people that were consultants. I met
Mhm.
people that were medical writers, just by happenstance, by being social in these settings, in these biotech settings, in these startup community things. I was going to all of these things I could.
Mhm.
And you start talking to those people and you start listening to their path, and they were like, oh, well, they were I met people from Penn, and they're like, oh, well, McKinsey comes to my university and recruits. And I was like, McKinsey's not coming to Thomas Jefferson and recruiting. So how do I get on these people's radar, the map or
Right.
whatever? So then I
Absolutely.
started reaching out to people to like just learn more and about all these things. So I'm a consultant now,
Right.
but I didn't do like 60 interviews in just consulting. Like I
Right.
like learned about every industry position, I think.
Wow. Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I've narrowed down on consulting,
Yeah.
after like a few interviews. But
Right.
the point I
I
wanted to make before we move on was
Mhm.
those first 20 interviews were like actual informational interviews. Like I learned
Mhm.
something from those first 20 interviews.
Right.
Everything else after that was pure networking and branding. I
Yes.
I reached out to those people. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about your role. I had already known everything about their role.
Yep.
I just wanted to get in their ear and say and speak to them and
Right.
hey, if something comes up, reach out to me.
Right. Right.
Let me know how I can help you. Those types of things.
Absolutely. So when you mentioned you had about those first 20 interviews and then you narrowed it down to consulting. So what were your top 3 choices of interest
Wow.
if you can
So
remember?
yeah, it was MSL, Medical
Mhm.
Science Liaison, business development
Mhm.
for like a university informational tech transfer thing, or to go into BD for like a company,
Yep. So wait, okay, and then consulting?
and then consulting.
Okay.
Those are like my top 3, and not in no specific order.
Okay.
Just those are the top 3.
Gotcha.
Medical writing was not in the mix for me,
Okay.
and I didn't want to be a staff scientist at like a company either.
And so why consulting?
So I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why not the other things, or I'll
Okay.
describe in brief the other
Okay.
jobs.
Perfect.
At MSL, right? Their job is to be like the point of scientific contact for
Mhm.
physicians
Mhm.
from the company's perspective. So, a
Yep.
physician has a question on a drug, they want to reach out about a clinical trial, they call the MSL.
Yep.
That's essentially what they do. Snapshot. But they only talk about what the company wants you to talk about.
Right.
You got to toe the company line. I
Right.
didn't want to do that
Right.
because you're at MSL for like one drug or two drugs, and you can only talk about your scientific opinion, but about that. You can't say, "Hey, our drug is the third best here. It's kind of poopy." You can't say that, right?
You
If you
can't.
work for
You can't
AbbVie
do
or
that.
whatever, right? You can't say that. So I didn't want to do that.
Right.
The business development thing was like, you could work for a university and be part of like information,
Yeah.
like tech transfer, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then or if you had some experience in it, which like I had an opportunity to like do like an internship. I didn't because once I learned about the position, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But at a company, you like do BD and it's like, hey, how can we partner with universities or small biotechs to get something accomplished?
Mhm. Mhm.
Some goal or whatever. How do we
Mhm.
reach out to those people? Kind of like an acquisition or partnerships and things of that sort.
Right.
So it is sciencey in nature, but it's a lot more business
Yeah.
oriented than I was looking for.
Gotcha.
And then consulting. Consulting comes in 2 flavors. One is management consulting, which is like what McKinsey does
Mhm.
and BCG and Bain. They like tell companies what to do, but help them implement that strategy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like they send their consultants to like the company and like they're like 4 days a week or something
Yeah.
like that. That's management consulting.
Mhm.
Then there's strategy consulting, which is like, hey, somebody says, I want to catch a fish. And then you say, well, you get a fishing rod and you get the boat and you go to this lake and you
Mhm.
cast it at this degree. Now go do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's strategy consulting.
Right.
We don't get on the boat with you and help you cast
Right.
the fishing line.
Right. You provide the blueprint to do it though.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more like strategic decision making
Yes.
support.
Yes.
Um, and so that was super interesting to me because it was less in like, a consulting question could be like, how do we reduce the cost of some operational thing?
Mhm.
It's like, help us do that. And that was not I didn't want to do that either because that's not really a science question,
Yes.
although that can be applied to biotech,
Right.
drug
Right.
manufacturing, whatever,
Right.
but it's not a science question in the nature of it.
Mhm.
Strategy is like, hey, we want to put our drug in this tumor and we don't really know if it'll work. What do we need to know?
Right.
And then like a consulting firm will actually provide an analysis that says, these are the things that you need to pressure test, and this is how you should build a trial to test it. So that's what I do now.
Right, which is awesome, and I know you really like your job, and you've been in it, what, 8 months now?
Yeah, I got hired in September.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like 9 months, I
Yep,
guess. So.
and it required you to relocate, right? Out of Philly?
Yeah, but it's in Princeton.
Okay.
So
So it's
Princeton and Philly are like an hour away from each
okay.
other. And so I live like 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia and still like 30 minutes away from Princeton. So I'm like right in between both
Gotcha.
cities. So technically I relocated,
Yeah.
but that's not really relocating in the Northeast.
Right, yeah,
It's like a
not
30-minute
30
drive back
minutes.
to where it was. Yeah.
Awesome. So in consulting, as you mentioned, you guys pretty much set the strategy for companies to be able to put forward the products or make modifications
hmm
to enhance the business of the company. So what does
hmm
that look like from your end? Obviously, consulting firms hire scientists, they hire PhDs, but how do you all stay abreast on the newest techniques or the newest technologies or maybe the newest types of strategies that works for a certain, whether it's an oncology drug or a diabetic drug? Like, why don't you kind of go into a little more details about that?
Yeah. So I would say that I only do oncology
Okay.
products. I only do oncology
Mm-hmm.
assets. And that's part of the reason why I'm at the company that
Mm-hmm.
I am at, is because 80% of the work they do is oncology
Gotcha.
focused. And then the other 20% is rare
Mm-hmm.
disease. And I don't do rare disease because my PhD is in
Right.
oncology. So that was like a sell
Mm-hmm.
for me, amongst other
Mm-hmm.
things. But to answer your question, the PhD teaches you how to solve complex
Mm-hmm.
problems, how to get to solutions, how to take a lot of data and synthesize that into, digestible
Yep.
pieces so that other people can
Mm-hmm.
understand, right? And so that's like the skill set that you get from the
Yep.
PhD. When you get put on a project, you have like several weeks to get, you know, to turn into an expert. A project could be 8 weeks
Mm-hmm.
long. The first 3 weeks are spent for you to turn into an
Mm-hmm.
expert
Mm-hmm.
and to,
I
build the structure and the
see.
framework out and like learn as much
Right,
as you
right.
can and leverage internal and external
Mm-hmm.
resources so that you can answer said question
Mm.
or said
So do you
ask.
still find yourself networking depending on what type of case you get put on your desk?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's totally different though, but it's like it's networking with not with like people within industry
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. It's mostly with
Mm.
physicians
So,
because it's like they're kind of the gatekeepers for
yes.
drugs and patient
Yes.
understanding, and you want to talk to physicians to understand their
Mm-hmm.
perspective. But even when you talk to a physician, at least in my experience, physicians really like talking to other physicians or
Mm-hmm.
PhDs. And I say this because there's people that work with me that are not PhDs, brilliant people, but
Yeah.
not scientists, and they're not from
Yes.
medicine. So when they talk to a physician, it's more like, hey, doctor, explain this to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like tiring
Yes.
sometimes for
Yes.
physicians. When I get on the phone with a physician to have a conversation about something, we're shooting the about some clinical trial or some disease state. More importantly, I've already read all of the
Right.
information that I've needed to read. And I'm not coming there for you to tell me, to
Right.
educate me. I'm coming there for you to pressure test some assumptions that I've made
Yes.
already. And so you're speaking to a colleague as opposed to, trying to teach me something. And I think that changes the dynamic that scientists have as physicians. And part of this is the value add for why PhDs in biomedical science get
Mm-hmm.
hired
Mm-hmm.
for consulting, particularly in the life science
Yes.
space.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It's a part of the reason why a lot of companies search for PhDs for MSLs and business development, pretty much all of the jobs that you were interested in.
Yeah, because the science is it's and to be honest, anybody, not anybody, but most people could do the actual functional elements of
Mm-hmm.
this job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not splitting an atom at work. I'm in PowerPoint and Excel and stuff like that. I'm not doing
Right,
calculus at work,
right.
even though it was like a huge part of like, you know, drug
Yes.
development classes I took. But I'm not doing
Right.
that at work, right? I'm doing Excel and stuff. So like MBA could do
Mm-hmm.
my job. the thing is that it's harder to teach the MBA
Science. Hmm.
science and
Right.
medicine than it is to teach a PhD
Right.
business. The other half of my job is learning about
Right. Right.
business, like commercial strategy and
Yes.
M&A and
Right.
all of that other stuff.
Was a part of
So,
your training and onboarding, maybe taking any business types of LMSs, or how did your training look to shorten that curve for your business side?
so I'll tell you what my company does, and I'll tell you what I know
Hmm.
from other companies. Training is like a huge part of consulting firms, because the model is really recruit smart
Hmm.
people. That's really the model. And if you're a PhD, there's always a space for you in consulting. You just need to choose what you want to do because that
Hmm.
literally is the model. I work with PhDs from chemical engineering to,
Wow.
whatever. So in my company, we do something called
Oh,
Axiom
nice.
University. It's like
Yeah.
2 weeks long. We teach everybody about, core
Hmm.
business stuff, core cancer biology stuff, core clinical concepts, in like a 2 week
Nice.
time frame. Different companies have whatever
Hmm.
version of that, onboarding, what have you. And there is an opportunity for you to take some courses at like MIT or like, like these 3-day
Hmm.
workshop things that are like crash courses and like high level business concepts. That is also an option at my job. And that's an option at other
Hmm.
consulting
That's
firms too.
awesome. 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 And let's just backtrack a little bit. So you defended, and between that time, actually, you graduated, and then you started your job, or did you defend? Like, let's go back to that time frame, and let's
Right.
talk about how, I know you did a lot of information or interviews, but why did you choose this company? Did they find you? Did you find them? Like, let's talk about your relationship now with this company, because I know that you've been killing it here, and your plan is to grow and do some great things.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
made a good match.
It's very, Lego style, just
Yes.
perfect fit. And I'll tell you how
Yes.
my timeline. And I
Okay.
don't recommend this. Don't
Okay.
recommend this, but I'll tell you how I did it. I got my offer before I defended.
And that's what you won't recommend.
I recommend having a
Mm.
defense date before you like take
Mhm.
serious interviews. Like you should ideally in January you should say, okay, I'm going to defend
Mhm.
in June, and then those six
Yeah.
months you should be
Yeah.
interviewing. Ideally, I was interviewing before I even asked for permission
Gotcha.
to write.
I did that
So I asked
too.
for permission to write, and like I asked for permission to write
The
because I was already
Yeah.
going to ask for permission to write, but there was an impetus to
Yeah.
to actually get it out
Yeah.
because I had got a job offer. I had gotten like
Yes.
two offers actually, like like a
Wow.
week apart. You had to like respond within like 2 weeks or something like that. So I was like, emergency committee meeting. I
Yeah.
need to write, and they were like, no. They were like, we're not going to let you defend. Like we're going to set a time
Yeah.
and like 2 months later
Mhm.
or like 3 months later, and then
Mhm.
ask then.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I accepted the offer, assuming that I was going to get permission to
Mm.
defend in that next
Mm.
committee meeting. So I was
Yes.
like hyper confident. Of course, all of this could have like blown up, but I was like very strategic.
Yeah,
Again, I
yeah.
don't recommend this because you had to. This was like a unicorn scenario, I think. So that was like I accepted the offer in like March. I actually um got permission to write
Mhm.
in like the summer. I stopped working in the lab
Mhm.
in September and started my job. I didn't defend
You
until
started
December
working before you defended. So that's even before
before I even defended.
graduation.
I just graduated like 2 months ago. No,
Lee-
I graduated like last month. Like last month, I graduated
And you've been at your job for 8 months.
and I've been at my job for 8 months.
Okay.
So the university will. You don't need to like the acquisition of the PhD was imminent at this point. I had submitted the paper. It had got
Mhm.
provisionally accepted
Mhm.
with minor revisions. So it was like the
Right.
paper was going to get published. So at that point, there was nothing
Yes.
that was holding me back
Yes.
except for physically defending. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna write the thesis and work. That I definitely don't recommend. Write your thesis,
Yes. Yes.
just write it, get it done before you start working. Because I was like sleeping like 3 hours a day, working 12 hours a
Oh
day, and
my
then trying to write
gosh.
my
And then you're
thesis in the
working a new
afternoon. And
job. So you were in the Axiom University while
yeah,
writing.
sucking. Yeah, not doing well. Like not sleep. Yeah,
Oh
it
my
was just I was
goodness.
bad.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend doing any of that. And so that was my timeline. But the ideal scenario, what I would recommend to students when I talk to students is that,
Hmm.
hey, get permission to write. Get a defense. Say,
Right.
okay, that's in January. Write your thesis. Try to put your defense date like
Hmm.
4 months away or something like that. Give yourself some time. Write your thesis in like 2 months.
Hmm.
Submit it to your committee. They're gonna give you comments. Finish that.
So, but what
Give it
about a
back to them.
job? Like everyone wants a
You're gonna
job.
be interviewing this whole time. You're interviewing this whole time because this isn't people know that
Hmm.
they're hiring a PhD. They know that your timeline is it's all over the place. They
Yeah.
know that you have to defend your thesis.
Yes.
They know that there might be edits.
Yes.
They know all of these things. So in a normal consulting cycle, you interview like essentially the fall or the cycle before. So like you interview
Hmm.
in August to December to start in like
Hmm. Hmm.
June or something. Like they interview like in the
Hmm.
middle of their MBA, and then they have their last year, and then they like work at the job that they did like an internship the year before or something like that. So it's like employers are no. So like I told them like, hey, look, I won't be able to start until I get accepted my offer in like March. I said I'm not going to be able to start until like
Hmm.
September. We're like 5 months away. They were
Hmm.
like, okay, fine. So they were super flexible. And my
That's
and
good.
my
So you signed, did you sign your offer
signed my
letter
offer
before?
letter.
So they let you sign your offer letter
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Which is not
Wow. That's
the
awesome.
the larger the company gets, the more bureaucratic it gets. If you work at like a large
Yes.
company, they'll say, "We need a letter from your registrar office that says
Yeah.
you've defended and you're going to graduate, and there's no
Right.
hiccups that could take place to stop you from graduating."
Right.
And I end up getting that like after the fact, but I work at like a startup for all intents and purposes. We are like 60 employees,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
so this is your next question of how I actually found Axiom. The CEO found
Yes.
me on LinkedIn,
Wow.
and he
You have to explain that.
he commented on a post that I made. We should have a separate discussion
Hmm.
about how to brand yourself on LinkedIn.
Yes, we absolutely will.
Commented on a post that I made, yeah, about a trial that read out that was like on uh, BRCA negative ovarian cancer. I was like, this
Hmm.
trial is like X, Y, and Z. My opinion on it. So then
Hmm.
he commented on it,
Yeah.
and then he sent me a message. He was like, "Hey, are you interested in consulting? I see on your page that you're interested in consulting. Are you looking for jobs?" I was like, "Yes." He was like, "Let's touch base on like a
The
Sunday."
CEO.
Yeah. But I would say that this is weird. Again, startup culture is like very different.
Yes.
But because like if in a normal setting, it would have been like a recruiter. Because like
Hmm.
recruiters are
Hmm.
like flooding my inbox currently. And that was just
Yes.
kind of the vibe beforehand. And there's a systematic
Yep.
way to approach this. But yeah, so
Okay.
when a recruiter reaches out to you, they want to have an initial conversation with you, and then eventually you'll talk to somebody at the company if the recruiter is like a third
Hmm.
party. In
Hmm.
this case, the CEO was like, "Hey, let's talk." I talked to him on like a Sunday night. I had essentially had my first round interview with him on a Sunday, and then he was like, "Hey,
Wow.
listen, I'm gonna forward your resume or your materials to our HR and our recruiting team. They're gonna set up a presentation for you." So I got all the information. I presented like a week later after I got the prompt,
Hmm.
and then I had two more interviews with like the chief of strategy and their
Hmm.
like one of their engagement directors, which is like
Hmm.
a VP in the consulting structure in the business space.
Yeah.
Everything went well. Got sent me an offer letter.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
very different from like the other
But you
consulting
said you were
interviews.
interviewing with two companies. So
Yeah,
what about, was it, did another CEO comment on
no,
your
no, that was
your BRCA mutation
no,
clinical comments?
that was like a networking thing though. Like I had reached out
Okay.
to like a contact, um, someone I did an informational interview with, they were like, "Okay, cool. I'll send your resume to this guy." I talked to him. He talked about my resume. He sent my resume to another guy. I talked to that guy who was like a director,
And-
and then
mhm.
he sent my resume to HR. And then HR was
Gotcha.
like, "Find a position on our website and send me an email. Don't even apply. Just send me an email, and I'll give you an interview for it." So I was
Wow.
like 4 people removed from like
Yeah.
on LinkedIn, like to, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that's just
Yeah.
how like networking works. Honestly,
Yes. Yep.
it's that's why relationships are important. I didn't get any.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I got any. I take that back. I did get like a medical. There was like a senior. It wasn't medical writing. It was like a content editor or something like that for like a medical
Mm.
communications company. That was
Mhm.
another thing where I didn't have any, and I just like reached out on LinkedIn, and they hit me back, and
Yes.
I went through the interview processes, and
Yep.
ultimately, like the salary was just like not compared to like the other offers I had. It was like not in the same. So I was like, no. Um, but yeah,
And like maybe let's touch on that too, because I know for me, like making money after my PhD was so important to me. And positioning myself to make money was so important to me because I knew, you go through a PhD program where you're not making a lot of money, you're working these long hours, it's
right.
tiring. So what hope or advice would you give to a PhD? They know they want to tap into industry. They have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities, and they want to find a job that's great for them, but they also know that money is a determining factor in that next step.
Well, honestly, I would say that if you got a PhD, you're never going to be poor. So that's number one. So for me, that
Yes.
was like because I came from poverty, so I was like, I need to make money, right? So,
Yeah.
and hindsight, I ended up in a great place. So, but the reason I was looking at MSL positions was because like they pay you like in the 150 range to start.
Yep.
So I would say that it depends on what your skill sets are. I think once you understand where the price ranges are for positions, you get a
Mhm.
PhD, you graduate, medical writing roles are going to be like 70 to 90K.
Mhm.
Consulting roles are going to be 75 on the low end,
Mhm.
all the way up to 140 if you get hired at McKinsey and Bain or the top four.
Mhm.
So anywhere
Mhm.
between 70 and 140, and probably the average is like six figures, like 110.
Yep.
Bonus structure is very different for consulting as opposed to other jobs. So that's an element. That's consulting. You're gonna work long hours. We can talk about that after. MSL is like super hard to get into, but they pay like 120 to like 140. So I think if you really care about money, it's like, okay, cool. Can I do those jobs? A. And then if the answer is yes to all of them and you really want to make money and that's your primary focus, then the the choice gets super easy.
Right.
If you want different parts of your job, like you want to go to work and be passionate about something, like no part of me wanted to work for like an like an advertisement agency for
Mhm.
pharma and be thinking about, I wonder what color these physicians are going to like for this drug commercial. That's not something and PhDs got hired to do stuff like that. And not
Yeah.
to boo boo it because there's a lot of money in there.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do that. Right. And
Right.
so I think it's all about the fit, but you're never going to be poor. And it all depends about what hopefully you did a PhD program and you don't have any debt on your PhD.
Yes.
If it's biomedical sciences, you shouldn't. And so if you got some crazy debt from undergrad and you got to pay down some stuff, then,
Yep.
you got to be conscious of like whatever fits your needs in that context.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. You drop gems per usual. And again, I'm just so proud of you. I'm so proud of seeing your growth. Everybody remember Lee because I promise you he'll be the CEO of a company one day. I'm sure of it.
I
I'm
appreciate it.
sure
Thank
of
you.
it. Thanks for joining us, Lee.
Also, please tell your guests to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any
Yes.
questions. Follow me, send me a request, message
Yep.
me, whatever. I'm super open to talk to you about consulting and otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll leave his information through the White Coat White Collar Instagram page and the LinkedIn community. Doodles.
Awesome.
That concludes today's episode of the White Coat White Collar podcast. If you like these discussions and want to continue hearing more, please subscribe and leave a comment on the platform that you've tuned into today. For more resources on unique career options for STEM and healthcare professionals, please follow White Coat White Collar on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you love what I'm doing and would like to be a sponsor to help me continue demystifying the career landscape, please visit whitecoatwhitecollar.com/sponsor. Thank you for tuning in and all the best on your career journey. Remember, take the journey one step at a time and don't be too hard on yourself. You got this. Until next time.